Dear colleagues, dear participants of Collins 2021, my name is Nataliia Romanyshyna. I am an associate professor of the Applied Linguistic Department in Lviv National Politechnic University. Let me present the results of my research, algorithm for disclosing artistic concepts in the correlation of explicitness and implicitness of their textual manifestation. Domestic and foreign linguistics has accumulated a unique and rich experience in the study of concepts formed in a specific scientific area which integrates interdisciplinary research approaches. Despite numerous works dedicated to the reconstruction of units of authors' individual artistic system, in modern linguistics the development of clear mechanisms for analyzing the artistic poetic concepts is still at the stage of formation. The aim of our research is to describe the algorithm of revealing the conceptual structure of poetic discourse based on the consideration of complex interrelation of explicit and implicit textual lingual forms, to describe the applicability of concordance tools for analyzing the poetic text semantics, the assessment of their efficiency in the study of poetic texts and authors' individual conceptual system reconstruction. The poetic works of an English Romantic poet, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, were selected as a source of empirical data. The function of explication of conceptual information is performed by the so-called strong position of the text: title, epigraph, preface, introduction. Semantic analysis of the vocabulary of the titles allows to establish the basic artistic concept of the work and to create the corpus of research text in the appropriate thematic and conceptual perspective. The structuring of artistic concept is also based on the consideration of the theme and plot. The main way of explicit verbalization of conceptual information is considered to be keywords, their compatibility, and thematic vocabulary. The selection of keywords makes it possible to single out lexical elements that serve as starting points in the continuous text development, unfolding the corresponding conceptual lines in various semantic connections of verbal elements. To optimize the selection of keywords, the method of constructing concordances of both individual works and the whole array of authors' text is highly productive. The semantic cognitive analysis of the artistic text of Samuel Taylor Coleridge poetry using the Tropes program revealed the following conceptual system, represented by verbal elements of the corresponding denotative fields or reference fields, among which the most numerous are the following: feeling, body, plant, time, and environment. The data obtained as a result of the program application revealed the lexical content of each of the defined reference fields, establish the frequency and distribution of lexical elements that verbalize the corresponding reference area, and facilitate the analysis of the contextual environment of the selected elements. The analysis of the distribution of verbal elements within micro-context allows us to establish the main ways of conceptualizing author's poetic reality. The analysis also identified the relevant subcategories in the system of the selected reference fields and the specificity of the distribution of lexical meanings that verbalize the corresponding reference conceptual fields in the text. According to the results of such analytical algorithm, it was found that the reference field man, feeling, nature, and environment are characterized by the highest density of lexical representation and are the most evenly represented in the corpus of Coleridge poetic text, which indicates the topicality of the relevant concepts in author's poetic picture of the world. However, the research indicates that the application of the Tropes program is limited and often does not shed light on the objective processes and mechanisms of analog-associative correlation of linguistic forms in the poetic actualization of key concepts of the author's artistic system. Therefore, the analysis with the help of the mentioned software were supplemented by the method of semantic grouping of verbalizes of the corresponding reference fields. The identified reference fields were grouped into the following conceptual area, the structure which can be semantically represented as follows. The next step of the analysis was to establish the specifics of the actualization of certain concepts within the general conceptual fields in terms of lexico-grammatical parameters of textual elements. The study of explicit forms of verbalization of artistic concepts is supplemented by lexical-semantic, stylistic, and contextual analysis. The frequency analysis of the lexical and grammatical parameters of Coleridge poetry allowed us to establish the relative distribution of the main parts of speech that take part in the process of artistic and poetic conceptualization. The most frequent lexical and semantic classes of words were verbs and adjectives, relatively evenly distributed in the body of text. The analysis also revealed that verbs and adjectives are the dominant elements engaged in the process of concepts metaphorization. Verbs that are most frequently metaphorized are the lexemes that belong to the lexico-semantic group of sensations, cognitive activity, psycho-emotional activity, and state. The most frequent adjectives involved in the process of metaphorization are the lexemes belonging to the lexico-semantic groups of sensory perception, axiological reflection, psycho-emotional state. Particularly high is the frequency of adjectives of color names or their associates, which have mostly positive evaluative expressive connotations. High-frequency phrases, adjective plus noun in the structure of metaphorical context testifies to the productivity of metaphorical episodes. Both abstract and concrete concepts can be represented metaphorically. Both abstract and concrete concepts can be represented metaphorically. Coleridge poetics is characterized by the phenomenon of synesthesia as the unity of visual, acoustic, sensory, and rational perception of the environment. Adjectives that perform in the text the function of both the attribute and the episode belong to the groups of qualitative adjectives denoted in light, color, temperature, weight of doing something, state, and sensations. Trope program also established the nomenclature and frequency of nouns involved in the creation of artistic poetic metaphor. According to the frequency of nouns involved in the creation of the metaphor, the conceptual sphere man and world nature were identified as those represented by the largest number of metaphors. Features of metaphoric conceptualization manifest the artistic and poetic reproduction of the basic artistic and aesthetic principle of romanticism, anthropocentric perception of the environment. Consideration of the conceptual content in the semantics of the literary text is achieved through the interaction of its lingual, structural, and speech discursive elements, which are not direct nominators of the concept. In this case, it is customary to speak of implicit forms of concepts objectivation. The approach to the study of artistic semantics from the standpoint of cognitive semiotics make it possible to consider the phenomenon of artistic text as a complex sign, a set of signs connected on the basis of systemic interaction. Semantic multifaceted nature of the text and factors of its formation are in the center of receptive aesthetics. Revealing the true existence of the artistic image requires the work of the reader's imagination, which fills the text with meaning and aims to fill the gaps in meaning. From the point of view of the theory of receptive aesthetics, the semantic potential of a literary work cannot be limited to one possible interpretation, since the objects of the image in the work of art are in a potential state. Its meanings are actualized into a single whole during reading interpretation. The semantic versatility of artistic and, in particular, poetic text is also in the center of linguistic poetics. From the lingual poetic consideration of the structural and semantic organization of the literary text as the interaction of three levels, ideological and artistic content, system of artistic concepts, linguistic and aesthetic resources, semantic complexity and versatility of the text is caused by the discrepancy between depicted and expressed. The possibility to penetrate into the processes of artistic semantics appear in the case of solving the problem of the relationship between the form and content, and the meaning and sense of the artistic poetic text. A fundamental feature of artistic merit is the correlation between the internal and external plans of the text as the possibility of embedding different meanings in the same form, and vice versa, the expression of meaning as a stable invariant in different formal manifestation. Thus, the semiotic, cognitive, receptive, and lingual poetic perspective of the text study organically complement each other in the understanding of the text as an embodied collective intelligence and experience. Therefore, the disclosure of implicit contextual information is carried out using a contextual-interpretative method, which is a set of procedures mainly receptively oriented, aimed at reconstructing the author's idea, ideological and thematic content, dominant artistic motives and meanings, preceded by the stage of contextualization, the revealing of micro and macro context, complicated, implicit, ambiguous form of actualization of the corresponding concept system, taking into account the author's worldview priorities, philosophical and aesthetic aspects of the text creation. The stage of contextualization involves the separation of the system of textual verbal fragments united thematically and meaningfully within the artistic and semantic plane. The next stage is the interpretation. At this stage, the interaction of the linguistic organization of the text with its ideological, artistic, conceptual, and emotional content is determined by application of stylistic, lexical-semantic, associative-semantic analysis, cognitive-semiotic analysis to distinguish the system of symbols of the literary text and their interpretation from the perspective of embodied conceptual meanings, narrative analysis during the study of certain genres of romantic poetry, such as ballads, lyrical ballads, conversational and confession poetry, in order to determine the textual poetic narrative strategies and to identify the speech of characters, establishing their conceptual function, because multifaceted textual meanings are formed by a variety of voices that, in case of collision of semantic codes, acquire the features of polyphony. All these prerequisites for the study of artistic conceptualization in the poetic discourse presuppose a symbiosis of diverse methodological models of scientific analysis, that consider textual meaning not as a static, intralinguistic, coded property, but as a dynamic result of artistic, communicative discourse practices that provide the choice of vector of scientific research, the flexibility of the system of research techniques, procedures, and stages. Given the understanding of this multifaceted semantic nature of literary text, determined by the very nature of fiction and poetic language, explicit and implicit forms of embodiment on textual meaning, the study of its conceptual system is based on the algorithm that combines instrumental methods of analysis and the methodology of contextual-interpretative analysis that presupposes a symbiosis of diverse methodological models of scientific analysis. Thank you for attention.